Well, hello and welcome to Overcoming the Fear of Change. So, we really hope that you will find this course helpful in all areas of your life, including the workplace. Let's go over our objectives. So, we will briefly explore why we fear change. Why do we have that innate fear of change? We're going to understand the stages that we all go through when we react to change. And then finally, we will review 3 techniques that we can use today to face and overcome our fear of change. Why do we fear change? Some fears are especially common in the workplace, but are also relevant in other areas of our lives. We're afraid, and I think this quote kind of sums it up perfectly. We're afraid that failure or mistakes will lead to negative consequences, right? We're afraid that success, what if that leads to situations that we don't have the skills for yet or the knowledge about yet? We're afraid of being judged or ridiculed. And just like people throughout human history, we are simply afraid of the unknown. So, first off, here, I want to start off this webinar by saying, don't worry. Our fear of change, whether it's happening inside or outside of the workplace, is as old as humanity itself. In short, here, change is not a new concept, right? But it can be a tricky one to accept and overcome. An important first step to overcoming fear of change is to really understand that it comes in 2 varieties. The first, constructive fear, really drives our response to an actual threat and tells us to take action to remain safe. An actual threat where our body reacts in a way that is trying to protect ourselves. The second kind of fear, so we have the constructive fear, right? Destructive fear. It triggers our reactions to perceived threats that exist only in our minds. So the best way I can relate kind of this is, if you're home alone and you're hearing sounds of the house settling, and then automatically you get scared, right? You're thinking someone's creeping around your house with you. So those perceived threats, they aren't immediate, right? Nothing's coming at you. It's just our brains kind of making something into something else, right? So our brains, now, whether it's a constructive threat or a destructive threat, our brains are wired to have the same exact reaction, whether these threats are real or imagined. So these reactions can make us see a tiger when it's actually just a kitten. So we start to recognize the difference between constructive fear and destructive fear. We can really learn to understand and then reframe for a more effective and appropriate reaction to change. So, for example, here, so this would be an example of a destructive fear, like if my presentation flops, I know I will get reprimanded. Don't let that take charge in your brain. Reframe that response into something that is more likely, which is going to be getting plenty of feedback to make an improvement plan for next time, right? So now that we've kind of explored why we fear change, we can move on to that next objective there. Understanding the 4 stages of reaction to change. So we all go through these same stages every single time we face a change. When we face an actual threat, the brain releases hormones and neurochemicals to give us that energy and the reaction skills that we need to take protective action. Fight, flight, or freeze. There are many other types of reactions that we can have, but those are just kind of the more common ones, right? So when we perceive an irrational threat that doesn't exist, what happens to those neurochemicals in our brain? What happens to that energy that we have naturally? Well, depending on the strength of our fear, it can actually start to manifest physically in our own bodies and our minds. It can come as stomach trouble, anxiety, or even depression, which are probably feelings we want to avoid, right? But just as an ostrich sticks its head in the sand when it feels threatened, we sometimes can use escape coping to hide from our fears. In escape coping, we intentionally do things to avoid the difficult and frightening aspects of change. Maybe we stay away from that town hall meeting where leadership explains the change, or we forget about a training on the new systems or processes, right? We might stop taking calls from a coworker who got that promotion we wanted or something like that. And some people even turn to unhealthy, destructive behaviors in their efforts to escape their fear. So while these actions might feel good in the short term, the fear will return with vengeance. So, unlike the ostrich, the bald eagle stays on the lookout for threats and opportunities so it can take preemptive action. If we do something similar, then we are using what scientists call control coping to address our fears. Control coping takes you out of being a victim of change so that you can be proactive and respond from a positive point of view. So, as you begin to feel that you are more in charge of your situation, like that bald eagle, you're able to manage your feelings, ready to become kind of an active participant in the change, and you will likely see your fear level go down. So the truth is, we don't just use one type of coping, and more often we kind of flip-flop back and forth between both of them. And it's really kind of a combination of the two. And I'm gonna let this image haunt you for a second. But in all seriousness, no, try to shift the majority of your efforts over to that control coping side. If you stick with escape coping too long, you'll become mentally and physically exhausted, and you kind of become more likely to begin at higher risk of experiencing symptoms of burnout, which can be devastating. So, generally speaking, we can all react to change by going through 4 stages. Feeling shocked, even disoriented, right? We respond emotionally. Then we need to learn how to come to terms with this new normal we've been faced with. And finally, after coming to those terms, we need to accept the change so that we can continue moving forward. So we'll go ahead and we'll start with that first one. We'll break that down. We'll start with shock and disorientation. When a change is announced, your mind may immediately generate fearful outcomes, both those rational and irrational ones, right? So if the change affects a group, at work, for example, the rumor mill can go into overdrive. And before you know it, you don't know what to think. And I'm sure this has happened to all of us at some point, whether inside or outside of work. That's why seeking out reliable information from credible sources is essential. But just because you've discovered the facts doesn't mean your fears, both those constructive and destructive ones, will vanish. To help you sort out which fears are rational and which are irrational, try talking it through with a trusted friend, a family member, or even a mental health professional. To keep those fears at bay, do everything you can to stay positive about the change. And remember to think about those good outcomes too. Even though change can be scary and frustrating, it can also bring positive things and make some tasks easier, which is usually why the change is coming about. So let's go ahead and move on to that next stage of reaction, which is responding emotionally. So I want to start this stage with a quick little video clip from the movie Anchorman, which I'm sure most of us, if not all of us, can relate to when talking about emotions and reacting to change.
What? I didn't understand a one word you said.
Ron, are you okay? Ron.
Ron, where are you?
I'm in a glass case of emotion.
So this clip, I hope, gives levity to the vast range of emotions that we can feel when experiencing change. But we are capable of opening the door and leaving our glass cage of emotion. So like the emotional Ron Burgundy, be ready for a wide range of shifting, even contradicting feelings during times of change. It can range from, anger, excitement, indifference, even hope, just to name a few. It might be tempting to ignore or dismiss these feelings, but your emotions are sneaky and they will always find a way to return. Instead, acknowledge those feelings, name your emotions, and call them out. It's important to articulate your role in a new situation and any new changes that come up. So, putting your emotions into words can help you move from an abstract mindset to a more productive view. I want to challenge you guys to create a personal mission statement or choose an affirmation or motto that you can revisit when you need motivation or direction. So on screen now are just a few examples of this. So we're going to upload it now, just a handout to help you out in kind of bringing a visual to your positive motto. So keeping a visual reminder of positivity to something that really kind of resonates with you can really help ease the fear of tackling new change. Now, growing up, as a kid going through so many different changes, my dad would always tell me to be positive because I didn't have a choice. My blood type was B positive, so I had to be positive. So whenever I face something new or scary in change, I always think to his voice telling me to be positive. Keep those mottos in mind the next time you face some change. It might bring you into a different mindset. So, the next stage in our reaction to change is coming to terms with the new normal. So no one truly comes to terms with the reality of change overnight, right? It takes time, and unfortunately, often more time than we expect or hope for, to really kind of shift that focus of our thoughts from the way we used to do things and what we've lost to kind of, what lies ahead of us and what we can gain. So, our initial reactions to change, we don't always take the time to think about what the change means and what that new reality will look like. And finally, even when we know something is going to take time, it can be easy to kind of grow impatient, kind of gain some frustration in that, both with the change process and our reactions to it. We can get pretty hard on ourselves, right? So remind yourself to slow down. Try not to be too hard on yourself or others if the change isn't progressing as quickly as you'd like. So, the final stage is accepting the change and moving forward, because that's what change really does. It pushes us to new and exciting things. So, accepting change does not mean you must like the result or forget about what you loved about the old way of doing things. Try to manage yourself and avoid kind of being grumpy about the things you can't control. Only when you fully understand and accept the change and your role in it will you be ready to kind of set those short and long-term goals and develop that plan of attack, right? Those are all of the reactions, the stages of reactions we go through when facing change. So let's bring this webinar full circle here with a few techniques to overcome and adapt to our fear of change. So, writing for Forbes.com, Jacqueline Smith offered a whopping list of 12 coping techniques to overcome fear of change. We'll post the article in that chat window for you to read through on your own time, but I did want to cover a few of these helpful tactics today. Acknowledge the change and the fear. The first thing is you got to call it out, right? Stay positive, or as my dad would say, be positive. Reduce your stress, keep an open mind, be flexible, and keep pushing forward. So, as we learned in Objective 1, fear of change is natural. It's a natural human response, and it's normal to feel those unsettled, confused, or angry emotions, but it's critical that you acknowledge your fears as specifically as possible. So Miss Jacqueline suggests, start by writing down your fears, both those rational and irrational ones. Once they're out of your head and onto paper, you can kind of gain some of that needed distance and objectivity. You can even brainstorm on what you would do if your fears came true, and you can write those ideas down too. Getting them out of your head and onto paper kind of makes them a little bit more real. And this is kind of a paradox, but bear with me here. The first step in gaining control of any situation, whether it be change or whatever you are facing, the first step to gaining control is admitting that you don't have control. And to do that, you must allow yourself to be vulnerable. And it's good to just know how afraid you are. Knowing this can really help you choose the right response strategies. Whenever we face change, it's completely normal to feel uncomfortable, fearful, alone, in a dark corner, surrounded by so much, right? It's almost like change can bring with it some kind of feeling of loss. But it's important to accept rather than ignore those feelings and be open to seeking help from a variety of resources, whether it be books, people, your pets, anything, whatever helps you with those emotions. If your fears are interfering with your daily life, there's nothing wrong either with seeking professional help. You really aren't in this alone. Just remember to try not to be an ostrich too much. Don't ignore or suppress your feelings. Return to that list of fears and ideas you created and use it for inspiration. The ideas you generated can help you stay positive, and remember that even if you can't control the change, you can control how you manage it. You can control how you react to it. Now, speaking of positivity here, try the find your few strategy. Identify a few things or people who care about you and have a positive outlook. And this can be anything from your therapist to your best friend, to your parents, to even your pet. Spend as much time with them as you can and less time with those who feed your fears. Surrounding yourself with others who have positive outlooks will inherently bolster your own positivity, right? So look to your few to support and guide you in the right direction during times of change. And accepting your feelings, it makes it so much easier to even ask for that help, right? Accepting this is how I feel, it helps you to be vulnerable. So not only for your few, but also from healthcare professionals should you need it. And again, myself and my dad can't say this enough. Stay positive. Humans are hardwired to fear change, and that's okay. But that can make it difficult to find and maintain a positive attitude. But dwelling on those negative possibilities and scenarios will only continue to feed that fear of change. To stay positive, be on the outlook for any reactions or responses that don't propel you forward, like fighting against an inevitable change. Like if you don't have a choice, guess what? Just go with it. Having an uncooperative attitude or even sabotaging yourself. Improving your emotional intelligence and becoming more aware of yourself and others will help to safeguard you against such behaviors as well. So the words we say to ourselves play a big part in shaping our attitudes and actions. What are you telling yourself about the change? You have more control over the internal dialogue in your head than you may realize. So give yourself more credit. Tell those critical voices in your head to be quiet, get out of here. We don't have time for you. And always remember that positive motto. So instead of beating yourself up, remind yourself of the times when you faced a change successfully and ask yourself, what worked for me in that situation? Who supported me? What personal qualities and strengths did I rely on then? And what did I do to relieve the stress and take care of my health when I successfully navigated that change? And always remember that any win, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, is still a win, right? So often we disregard our tiny little victories or think that they don't matter. But each day, I want you to take some time to really recognize and celebrate the things that you did right. These incremental attitude boosts will add up and help you to maintain that positive perspective. So here are some two analogies for you. Even strong trees bend with a storm. And sure, they might lose a weak branch or two, but they don't uproot all of the time. At first glance, the scene of a wildfire looks like charred black mess, like nothing's ever going to grow. But before you know it, new growth appears like magic. Nature is flexible and resilient, and you can be too. This is a good comparison to kind of keep in mind during some difficult times of change. Is it difficult right then and there? Absolutely, but we can be resilient and move on and grow through it. So in the past, people thought that many of our personality traits were set early on in life, and this belief is known as a fixed mindset. It's a way of thinking that makes change difficult. More recently, Carol Dweck, she is the author of best-selling book Mindset, The New Psychology of Success, as well as other researchers, have really proven that we can change the ways that we think about ourselves and our abilities. So Dweck calls this different way of thinking a growth mindset. If you're more in that fixed mindset type, try to investigate ways to really shift your thinking toward that growth and toward possibilities, right? It's impossible to move forward if you're standing still. So, when you must face that change, actively look for those opportunities and challenges and ways to exceed the expectations of your previous situation. We all come with our inherent strengths. So, when you're facing a new change, look for ways that you can get involved using your strengths. Instead of digging in your heels and resisting change, approach it with an open mind. Even if you don't like the change, people will notice your positivity and they'll want to work with you and support you through that change. All about that be positive. I tell you, my dad was on to something. And finally, just keep moving forward. Any change, big or small, takes time. You may find yourself waiting and waiting while your fears are just growing and growing, right? Even when it's difficult, though, try to be patient. Keep your purpose in the forefront and your mind occupied with the ways that you contribute to that purpose every day with your words and your actions. And the same holds true if you're facing changes in your personal life. Be patient with yourself and others and really try to focus on the overall situation. And as Dory from Finding Nemo advised, just keep swimming. And that's good advice for anyone who is fearfully facing change. Don't give up. Continuing your efforts can help you reach your destination, and your fears then will likely subside. That covers all of our objectives today. Please remember, change is hard and it doesn't happen overnight. Be patient with yourself and others. Give yourself time to move through all of those stages and trust that you will make it work. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Here, again, that website and our email. Don't be afraid to reach out to our team with any questions, comments, topic ideas for future training developments. Again, thank you guys